Greetings and salutations, my excellent friends. Hello there. How you doing? Hope you're having a great day. It is Sunday morning here in the land of the morning call, meaning that it is time once more for the QiRanger Adventures podcast. This is episode number 218. Booyah! Oh yeah, baby. Booyah. It is a beautiful, beautiful day, and today we have Max Beer for the podcast. An all malt beer. Cheers. I raise my glass to you. Or I guess I should say I raise my 500 ml can of beer to you. Thank you so much for joining me this week on the podcast, whether it be on YouTube, whether it be on QiRanger.com, or if you're downloading the podcast via iTunes. Thank you so much for joining me this week. We have got a lot of news, a lot of things to go over, and really a lot of fun. So without further ado, let's jump into the news, ladies and gentlemen. And I think what I want to talk about first is North Korea, because on record, the current year, 2012, is the worst drought in recorded history for North Korea. The worst, at least since 1962. And that is a huge, huge issue because as it stands right now, there has been no rain in a month. No rain. I mean, think about it. You're already hungry. You're already starving. Your crops are failing. And the thing that you need so desperately to make food, you just can't get it. It's one of the reasons why so much time and effort is being put into humanitarian aid as it deals with North Korea. And I really hope that over the next few years that North Korea becomes more self-sufficient, because what's really taking place up in this little reclusive dictatorship is that Kim Jong-un and his military advisors are really just hoarding as much as they can to try and bolster the military to keep themselves healthy, while the people out in the countryside just don't have enough to eat. There was recently a story that was released where someone that was in North Korea, it was one of our friends who was a defector from North Korea who was going on a DMZ tour. She was telling us how the person was sharing their stories about living in North Korea. And they shared with the tour group that while she was living in North Korea, she thought that she was living in the best country in the world. Until she went on a trip to China and she saw how people were living in China. When she went back to North Korea, she then planned her escape and went through China and now has come to South Korea. Here, she has a completely different life, a better life, and is hoping that one day more of her friends, more of her family can experience what she has experienced since leaving North Korea. But until that time happens, I really hope that they get some rain. It's been a very, very dry last few weeks here. We have gotten a few drops of rain, but nothing that would help grow crops. And as the year progresses, I really hope that there's enough runoff, that there's enough irrigation water, that we don't come to a point where our crops start to swelter in the horrible, horrible summer heat and drive up the costs as the year progresses. So that is the North Korean news. But on another front, you may be seeing some more pictures from me on the website soon on QiRanger.com. One of the things that I dusted off this week, as I have another swig, was my old digital SLR, a Canon 20D that I picked up in 2005. My very first digital SLR. I'd used a film Pentax camera for a number of years before then, and I loved it for, I think I used it for 2-3 years before I really got into the video work. And at that time, digital SLRs weren't video cameras. They were stills. And as I found myself falling more and more in love with taking film and making YouTube videos, I kind of just left it in its case. Haven't really touched it. But there's a rumor going around that the next Canon, the Rebel T4i, the 700D and the 70D will have what I have been waiting for a long time. And that is the ability to zoom and pan and track autofocus with the cameras. And if that's the case, I may look at picking up a 70D or 700D to do some of my videos with in lieu of getting a 3CCD camera. Now, the reason why I mention this is because there was a recent job posting for a travel videographer. It was a great job, but they specifically wanted a DSLR videographer, not someone with a 3CCD camera, but with a DSLR. And I thought that was interesting because most of the pro jobs that I see really specify a 3CCD camera. And that's more of what I would really want because I want that professional quality camera. And while DSLRs are great, they really haven't quite made the leap to pure filmmaking. They're still great stills, and while the 5D Mark II and the 5D Mark III are fantastic for making videos, there's, in my mind, in my opinion, there's a lot to be left to be desired for in terms of using that for the films that I like to make. But I'm enjoying playing with the cameras. I had to dust off my old compact flash card reader to draw the film off, and it was just a lot of fun. And I'll talk a little bit. I guess I don't have those pictures in the content rewind, so I'll talk about them here. I went to the Suwon Fortress over the weekend to do a story for Korea.net, and since I hadn't used the camera for a long time, and even though Joe and I have been to the fortress many times, I took the camera and just had so much fun playing with it. It was great. So I posted those pictures up this week, some other pictures, and of course some candid shots of some kids on the weekend as well. So a lot of fun playing with the camera. I hope to be doing a little bit more on the photography side, just playing with it and showing some spontaneous moments in Seoul that I used to do only with the iPhone, that I continue to do on Instagram and Facebook. And I really want to get back into using the camera just a little bit more. And speaking of Facebook, you will also see me using the Facebook Pages app and the camera app a little bit more to kind of spread content between different sites and bringing people into conversation. So if you're following along with the QiRanger Adventures Facebook fan page, thank you so much. Having a great time there. But if you're just following along on Twitter or Facebook, you won't be too much left out. I'll kind of change things up here and there, but it's still a lot of fun, and just a lot of fun to be able to share interesting pictures as we move through life here in Korea. But the meaty stories that I want to tackle this week revolve around multiculturalism. Now, the first story that I want to bring up is a story out of the United States. And for the first time since it began, the census is now predicting or has recorded that there are more children, more babies born of color, Latinos, blacks, Asians, in the United States than Caucasians. And this is in 2012. And the reason why I bring this up is for a couple different reasons. Number one, and I really can't remember when this was. I want to say it was probably in third grade. It was probably in third grade. We read this story in social studies about how in the year 2010, the quote-unquote minorities would then surpass the Caucasians and become the majority in the United States. And this is back in the 70s. I want to say 78, 79 when this article that we read in class came out. And I remember thinking to myself, wow, that's 40 years. 30 years in the future. I really couldn't comprehend thinking that far in advance, what it would mean for society. And here it is, 2012, 2 years after the projected date, and it's happened. And I really think this is going to be an interesting development for the United States, because my personal experience living in Arizona and in Texas and a lot of different areas of the country is that many Caucasians still have a huge issue with people who have ethnicities other than Europeans. And I see that especially in Arizona, where we have this really crazy immigration status where if you get pulled over and the officer doesn't believe that you're in the country legally, you have to provide the documentation right there on the spot. I think as time progresses, it's really going to be interesting to see how America changes, because it is going to change with more and more people coming into the country, bringing their cultural backgrounds to make it a true melting pot. What was once considered to be classical American is going to change. And I think that's a great thing. And I really think that if many Americans who hold on to the idea that it's a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant nation, they're going to have to find a way to significantly readapt to their surroundings, or they're going to be left being an antiquated dinosaur. It's cool. It's really cool. I can't wait to see what happens. Which brings me to a story that broke just recently here in Korea on MBC. And I have to give a huge thanks to my friend Zachary, Crimson North, Scruzel, who took the time to find a translation for this Korean news piece. And I use news in air quotes. And it's really a big piece of yellow journalism. A news story about foreigners victimizing Korean women and the detriment to Korean society that foreigners have on it. Because now in Korea, foreigners have pushed the population over 50 million. And that's huge. Over 50 million people live here in South Korea. That's amazing. But this story in particular focused on foreign men hooking up with Korean women and how bad that is for Korean society. They painted most foreign men as sexual criminals, as being obsessed with sex, as being laden with drug use and promoting sexual diseases, especially HIV. And they actually term the women in this as victims of foreigners. And like many foreigners, have a huge problem with this news piece. Number one, it doesn't really address what's really happening. They show videos of like Hongdae and Itaewon, where people go of all races to hook up. They made a comment in the video about how foreigners are with Korean women and they're walking arm in arm, hand in hand, and how disgusting and how crass that is. And that really is a throwback to conservative Korean values that you used to not see public displays of affection. But even now on a Christian university campus where I work, you see students walking hand in hand, being more affectionate towards them, not necessarily kissing and making out, but what is acceptable now would be unthinkable back then. And that's one of the points that was in the video that they really were overblowing. It was stupid. They also never brought up the fact that it really takes two to tango. That if you're going to hook up, there are consequences for that. Or there could be consequences. You could get an STD. You could become pregnant if you just hook up without knowing the person that you're having sex with, without doing due diligence, without having a relationship with that person. You run a risk of some dire consequences. And that is not indicative to Koreans. mixing with foreigners. That's indicative of humans mixing with humans. You have sex. There's a possibility of having a baby. It doesn't matter, who is actually having sex. It's just a man and a woman has sex. You may have a baby. Put a condom on it. Be smart about it. The video just really paints a poor picture of especially women as being weak-willed, easily manipulated, too dumb to think for themselves, to actually try and do anything that would be what the producer or the writer would think would be morally acceptable. And that's bad for Koreans as well, because they're essentially blaming the women as well. And that's just uncalled for. Now, I will say that I have been here for 4 years, and while I have been to Hongdae and I've been to Itaewon a number of times, I will also say that I have seen foreign men come here, and they're in the mindset, I'm in Korea for 1 year. I'm going to have fun and sleep with as many people as I can. I think that is boorish behavior. I think that is poor behavior. I do not think that is the right attitude to live by. I don't think promiscuity is healthy. I think that you're taking too many risks doing that. But on the other side of the coin, if someone is an adult and wants to be associated with that and participate in that, then that's their choice as well. As more and more people come into Korea, and especially as the pop music industry is sexualized, there's going to be a huge sexual revolution in Korea. And the old guard, the people in power positions, the people in the media, just are not ready for that. They are not ready for that. They really are trying to hold on to these antiquated Confucian ideals, while at the same time trying to promote super sexiness around the globe and not really understanding what that can mean. So, great piece, great editorial comment by Zachary. The link to his blog, where you can see the video and his comments and follow along some of the discussions, will be in the show notes. So if you'd like to learn more about this, make sure you do that. You can also follow Zachary on Twitter at, make a note, make sure that's on there, at Crimson North. Crimson North is his Twitter handle. Crimson North, yeah. Yeah, and the last little bit of news is, if you saw Facebook on Thursday, I've reached pretty much my Project 85 goal. That's one of the reasons why I'm having the beer. I was at 85 kilograms and 94 grams. So 85.09. So just, I guess, really 9 grams. Yeah. Almost down to it. So that was pretty awesome. So kudos. I never thought I would actually get down to this low weight. So there you have it. That is the opening news. A lot of stuff, but really, if you want to know more about racism and xenophobia in Korea, check out the link in the show notes to the video, and you get an idea of what many see on a day-to-day basis with some of the more conservative news outlets. And going back to that, I want to say last year, I was riding home on the bus and was approached by a worker who was trying to get me to teach private lessons, which I don't do. But he wanted to have me do it because I looked like a nice guy, and he wasn't concerned about me being a drug dealer or a sex criminal like the other male students at his daughter's hagwon. And I bit my tongue because we were in a public place. But I let him know that just because someone is from a country doesn't mean that everyone is like that. So just because one person committed a crime doesn't mean everyone is. And if you look at this, the stats and the research behind a lot of the criminal activity here in Korea, it's usually committed by gyopos or ethnically Korean foreigners that they have to now, but in the past did not have to go through the same scrutinizing that Caucasians did. So just putting that out there as well. So this has been going on for a while, so let's go ahead and move on to the content rewind. Podcast segment number 2. Oh yeah, the content rewind. Ooh yeah. First up on the QiRanger Adventures YouTube channel was Cape Barako Studley Man Coffee. Oh, I have to say that was delicious. That was so good. Just sitting here in the office and thinking about that rich coffee just brings back so many memories. When we went down to Yosu for the expo, we made it a point to stop off at the Philippine Pavilion. And I met Pasita and her staff that runs the gift area there. And we talked about what I did and that I love coffee. And she steered me over to where the coffee was at the store. And we had a great conversation. Of course, Joe was there, so we were all talking. And of course, I had to buy some. So Joe has actually been trying to get me to try Cape Barako while we were in the Philippines many times, but we just never got around to it. So I picked that up, and then I picked up one other kind of coffee. Now, I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I will say that in a couple of weeks, there will be another coffee review video. And I'm hoping to shoot that with An Jung Hyung of 1013 Main Street, who also loves coffee. And I mentioned it a while back to her, and she agreed to it. So hopefully she'll continue to support this coffee test. I'm really looking forward to it. It's a coffee that I've never had before, and I'm hoping that it is delicious. I go back into the radio to do a live show on the 8th of June, so at the end of this week, and I'm really hoping that it all comes together and we can film that and just have a really good discussion about Philippine coffee. And if you don't know this, the Philippines is one of the few countries that has every single kind of coffee bean out there. So yeah, coffee is awesome. We also, on Friday, did a video at Ainsworld, a company blog article over on the Korea blog about Ainsworld. And Mr. Paul, if you're watching this, that's right, Mr. Paul, he was actually out here in Korea when Ainsworld was being constructed. So I have a longtime viewer. One of my very first viewers on YouTube was here in Korea and helped make Ainsworld. Now, Ainsworld is, of course, an amusement park here in Korea where they have recreated many of the world's most iconic structures. Now, these structures range from the Eiffel Tower to Colossus of Rhodes, the Great Wall of China, the Space Shuttle, the Twin Towers, you name it, it's there. And it's all about 1/25th scale. And it's actually kind of fun to walk around. It's 10,000 won to get in, which I think is a bit pricey. And to be perfectly honest, if I wasn't really doing the article and if I wasn't really doing the video, I probably wouldn't go there. It takes roughly an hour to make your way through the entire park. And unless you're with a fun group that likes to take interesting pictures in front of all these different locations, it's probably not for everyone. But the video was I was trying to do something different with the video, something fun for the video, and that's why I shot it with, okay, here's the intro and here's the outro, and in between we have 16 different scenes from the 71 that were there, and to see if people can correctly identify them all. I chose a lot to try and represent every part of the world, and I figured if Jules Verne can write a story about going around the world in 80 days, which by chance I'm reading right now on my iPhone, I can do a video doing the same thing in 80 seconds. So that's where the tie-in came from, and it was a lot of fun to edit. It was a lot of fun to go through and pick out which ones I wanted to do. On the Korea blog, I just did it with 10, since different kind of news article there. And yeah, so I can hear my phone ringing over on the side. Also up here on the blog, QiRanger.com. Oh, I did talk about this. The different buses now are having a lot more digital signs on the buses themselves. And this is actually kind of cool, because it used to be that when you're riding the bus, they would announce the stop and you had to pray and hope that you caught it. What they've done now is install televisions on the displays, and they show cartoons, they show ads for different things coming up here. And when you're riding and the stop comes up, a big oval display comes up, and you can see what stop it is. Unfortunately, it's in Korean. It'd be nice if it was actually in Korean and English, like a lot of the actual maps are, but this is just in Korean. And you can actually see what the next one is, because a lot of the maps now don't have every single stop. So if you get on a bus that doesn't have every single stop delineated, then you're kind of up Schitt's Creek. You're up Schitt's Creek, really. So there you have it. The other one it did, kids, the candid picture of a couple of kids while we were out on Monday. And also, Wheeze Wanders, he interviewed me for his blog, and that link is also in the show notes. So if you want to read his questions and hear my responses, you can click on that and head on over to that little Aussie bloggers website. So there you have it, the Content Rewind. It is time once more for the question of the week. And this week's question comes from Liboman1988. And Liboman1988 asks, what are my must-see places to see in the United States? And that I thought was a very good question, because I get these questions for recommendations many, many times, and I'm always struggling to find what is the best answer. And I usually always say that it really depends on what your interests are. What kind of things are you interested in seeing? But to answer Liboman's question, I've come up with five different things that I think are unique to the American experience, that showcase America and are places that I really enjoy traveling to. And the first one up is, of course, Yosemite National Park. I'm a big fan of national parks. I love national parks. I think that they are absolutely awesome. And if you get the chance to go to Northern California, I really think that if you have 3-4 days, going to Yosemite is well worth your time. There are very few parks in the world like Yosemite. It's a fantastic place to go. Highly, highly recommended. It's actually a park that my family went to time and time again while we were growing up. And even now, as we're going back this summer to the United States, I really don't think I'm going to have time to hit up a national park. And it really saddens me, because I get such joy going to these parks and just experiencing nature, reliving and reconnecting with the earth in that way. It's just fantastic. In my own home state of Arizona, we have the Grand Canyon, which I'm going to go see this summer. Yes. Grand Canyon is awesome. When I was growing up, many, many times, I thought it was nothing more than just a big hole in the ground. And it really wasn't until I started hiking the Grand Canyon that I got a whole new level of appreciation for it, a whole new love for the Grand Canyon. And I really recommend anyone going to the Grand Canyon, you have to go below the rim. You have to go for a little bit of a hike to go down below and really see the layers, see the nature. If you can, go camping in the Grand Canyon. It's so beautiful, so peaceful, so dark at night. You can see Indian Gardens from the North Rim, which is halfway down to the canyon floor. You can see that from the opposite side. In the distance on a clear night, you can see Las Vegas. It is amazing. Love it. If you're in Illinois, a stop to Chicago's Field Museum is a must, as well as the Museum of Science and Industry. Those are two of my favorite museums in Chicago. Fantastic places, just tons of stuff to learn, well presented, fantastic. And while you're doing this, take a road trip. The United States has some beautiful scenic highways and byways. It's fantastic. An upcoming story that I'm doing on 1013 Main Street is about traveling along Route 66. And it's been one of my dreams for years to travel from Chicago to LA, more than 2,000 miles along the way. to get my kicks on Route 66. Oh yeah. It's something I really, really want to do. I'd love to be able to do that full journey, to film it, to have just an awesome experience. I think it'd be awesome. And then if you're in the DC area, stopping off at one of the many Smithsonian museums. They are brilliant. They showcase so much, and you can learn so much by doing that. So there are a handful of things of what I consider must-see experiences, must-go-to locations in the United States. It's really tough to narrow it down because the country is so huge. So hope that was helpful. If you have a question for me, please shoot me an email at podcast@QiRanger.com. You can leave it for me on the video page for this week's podcast. You can leave it on the blog page. You can shoot me a message on Facebook. Tweet it to me at QiRanger. But if you ask me a question, I'll be more than happy to answer it either in a personalized video response or as part of this podcast. This week's Travel Talk segment takes us back to 1013 Main Street, where Anjan Hung and I talk about getting ready for the summer season. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, of course, I don't have the audio this week, but surf on over to QiRanger.com by clicking on the show notes below and scroll down to the Travel Talk segment, and you'll be able to hear the audio in its entirety. And that will just about do it for this week's podcast. Thank you so much for listening. I really do appreciate it. If you have any feedback, I would love to hear from you. Please send me a message at podcast@QiRanger.com or tweet it to me at QiRanger on Twitter, or leave it in the comments, or shoot me a message on Facebook. I love hearing from you. As we get ready for season 3, I'm looking at trying to change a few things and trying to make the podcast even better. I have a few ideas. I'm not going to share them with you just yet, but I cannot wait. It should be a lot of fun. If you know of someone who likes travel, who likes Korea, who likes learning about the world, I hope you'll share the podcast with them. I'm always interested to grow the audience, to have some great conversation. So if something in the podcast spurred your interest, please share it with me. I would love to hear from you. But until next time, may the road always rise to meet your feet. May the wind be always at your back. And may you have an absolutely fantastic day. I'll talk to you soon.